Today, I want to talk about some of the security vulnerabilities that have made it into the news in the recent months and maybe even years. Now, I'm not a security expert and I just have opinions on those articles. And what I want to do today is share my opinion with you. So if you're into that, let's talk about that. So first, let's start with a headline that read something like, "Computer was hacked with an $8 device or $10 device," or something like that. And it was kind of a catchy topic, saying that you could hack a computer or bypass encryption with a really cheap electronic gizmo that you can possibly buy somewhere. Well, that's not entirely true, and the actual story is a little bit more complicated. First, let's do a quick recap of what happened. So on your computer, when you use BitLocker or some kind of encryption, there is an encryption key that is used to decrypt the data. Just like when you compress something into a zip file with a password, you have a password and you need to put that password somewhere in some kind of secure location. You could write down in a post-it note, you can put it in a notepad and save it to a text file or something like that. So your computer does kind of the same thing. When it encrypts partition on your hard drive, it needs to put that encryption key somewhere so you could later get it and decrypt it back. And where it puts it is into this TPMS chip that's built into the motherboard. And what this person did is they found a way to get that encryption key. They opened up the back of a laptop and they saw that it has like exposed test pins, and they just tapped into different connectors and started probing to see what information is there. And they found that that encryption key gets transmitted between the TPMS chip and the other components, and the person was able to intercept that key and use it to obviously decrypt content of the hard drive. So first, let's address the $8 device that was used to hack it. It wasn't $8 device, and it's not like it will cost you $8 to hack it. The person had, I don't know, $100,000 worth of knowledge in their brain in order to use that device and in order to actually perform that operation. They also had computers at home, they had oscilloscopes, they had all kinds of equipment. Yes, the final board that was doing the reading was an $8 board, but it's not like you can just go buy an $8 device and hack whatever laptop you want. So that's a headline, obviously was there to draw your attention. It wasn't $8 worth of equipment to get the data. So is this something you need to worry about personally? Probably not. If you have that specific type of laptop, maybe. If you don't, yes, there are probably ways of getting a key out of TPMS chip. Maybe there are other workarounds. But if you do have super secret information on your laptop, maybe you should have an extra level of protection in addition to what Windows provides. So I say don't worry about it unless you have that specific style of laptop and you also live in it in places unattended. The next thing I want to talk about are CPU vulnerabilities. So this has started showing up a few years ago when there was an announcement about Intel CPUs, that they have vulnerability that allows people to get encryption keys or something like that, or get access to protected memory. Then AMD confirmed they had the same issue, and now we have Apple M-series chips that also have similar problem. So what's the nature of these CPU vulnerabilities? I'm going to kind of generalize here for the sake of simplification, but I believe the idea for all these problems is the same. Now, if you remember years ago when I was younger, we used to have this megahertz race, a gigahertz race. Right? The computers come out with a 100 megahertz CPU, and then another comes out with 120 megahertz CPU. So it's going to be faster than that, and then 133 megahertz and 150. And every time there is a new CPU comes out, you want to upgrade because it was meaningfully faster than the previous version. Well, nowadays, that's no longer the case. We no longer have this gigahertz race. And the reason for that is because we changed how we get more performance out of CPU. It's not just by increasing its clock speed, but by building in different optimizations. So for example, when you watch video on YouTube or DVD or Blu-ray, video needs to get decoded from the stored format to be displayed. Well, that process is actually really CPU intensive, and if you would try to decode video with just a CPU, it would be pretty slow. You would have a high CPU utilization and your computer would be slow in general. But what we do now is we figure out what things people do, like watching videos, and we built in components into the CPU that would help improve that video decoding. So this way, main CPU could keep doing whatever it's doing, and the part of a CPU could be decoding videos. And same thing with like generating hash numbers, encrypting, and all kinds of stuff like that. There are lots and lots of additions to a CPU. So it's not just the raw gigahertz that's doing all the work. And this optimization is where all the problems are coming from. As we're trying to write additional logical code, I guess you don't have code in a CPU, but additional logic to improve speed of a processor, there are bugs, there are issues, and by exploiting those issues, people able to get around different restrictions in memory and able to access things they're not supposed to. The actual technical explanation is really, really technical, and it's beyond level of even a lot of low-level programmers. So I don't understand it thoroughly, but I understand it enough to know this is where the issues are coming from. And which is why whenever those issues get patched in software by Windows, for example, the CPUs tend to become slower. It's because those improvements, optimizations, were disabled or not being used by Windows. And the last vulnerability we need to talk about is XZ compression utility in Linux systems. Now, because it's Linux, it probably was off your radar if you're not into tech stuff, but I can assure you that's the biggest vulnerability, or it's actually a backdoor, and it's way worse than anything else that we've seen before. All right, well, so what is this one about? Well, XZ is a compression utility that is used on Linux. And the vulnerability, or actually a backdoor that's been found, which would allow user from outside the environment access computer's file system through this utility. They have a special authentication, a special way of connecting to it, and because the utility it has root access, which means has full access, it will allow user to get into file system and access any file they want. And this is absolutely crazy, and we were so lucky that this got caught. I want to explain a little bit why I think this one is such a huge deal. It may sound like a conspiracy theory, but believe me, this is not at all, and this is all absolutely truth and how things are. So to understand it, we need to talk about weapons of war, right? And we're used to thinking of weapons, you know, bullets, rockets, missiles, torpedoes, and stuff like that. But nowadays, internet is a huge weapon. You know, we can use internet to connect to other systems and control them. And one of the things that governments do is they purchase vulnerabilities in different software just so that they could create a virus that could be potentially distributed that would go to other computers in other countries or whatever countries they want it in. And what they're able to do is, if there is a war, if there's conflict, they're able to access infrastructure of another country. So they could shut off their electricity, they could mess with water chemistry, they can do all kinds of stuff. They have control over infrastructure they have access to. While that does sound like science fiction, this is something that's been done. America has created a virus that's been going through networks, and it's been targeting a very specific set of computers. I believe it was one of the countries in the Middle East that was refining uranium or something like that. And America didn't like that, so they created this virus that was slowly navigating through computers until it actually finds its way to their network. And eventually it did. And what the virus did is it started messing with the process of refining of uranium while simultaneously tricking computers to report that everything's going as normal. That was like a real thing, and you can research that yourself if you'd like, but that's a real thing, and that happened. And countries are weaponizing these viruses to attack other countries should they need to. The problem with them is once you use that virus, the secret is out and you no longer be able to use it. So what different countries try to do is to create that virus, send it out, and have it sit there for as long as possible so that they could use it whenever needed. But again, once they use it, it's done. So all they do is they want to get the virus out there and just wait in case the need arises. So why am I telling you all this? Well, because the backdoor that's been found is at that level. It is at a level of probably a government trying to hack into all these systems in order to have access to them at the later point. We know the username who submitted that code that specifically had that backdoor in it, but we don't know anything about the user. We can't find them. We don't know where they are, who they are. We don't know anything. But it seems like this is what another government or professional, hacking group or something like that would do in order to have access to computers that control the internet. And if this was to ever get exploited in the future, the damage could have been huge. So we got really lucky that this was discovered, and now it's not going to make it into production version of Linux. Speaking of, this was caught in a beta version of that software. So we were really lucky that this did not go into production. And while this wouldn't affect you personally right now, or doesn't affect anybody, this could have affected us all in absolutely huge way that cannot be understated. This is 10 out of 10 security backdoor, and I really feel like it should have gotten more news coverage than it actually did. And speaking of vulnerabilities that didn't get enough coverage on the internet, put in the comments which one do you think they are. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and I will see you on another video.